All right. So this is what this picture says right here. Racist expressions to abolish from your vocabulary. In Brazil, there are a number of racist expressions that are used every day that should be removed from the nation's vocabulary as soon as possible. This particular piece is by Jessica Coutinho. So this is what she says. This is what she writes. Due to more than 300 years of the slavery system in Brazil, some behaviors and actions have been ingrained in today's society by a good part of the population. Racism, for example, goes far beyond explicit verbal aggression. It is also present in words considered trivial and harmless, such as Orvelha negra, meaning black sheep, mulata, which means a mulatto woman, preto com alma branca, meaning a black with a white soul. These expressions offend and hurt in the same way. The deconstruction of these expressions is a long and laborious process, but only then can society undergo a real process of change. Even in times where information is just a click away, many are unaware of such expressions. The specialist in Afro-Brazilian and African history and culture, Darlete Nascimento, reinforces the power that words have. It's important to understand that these words and expressions come from the colonial period. We need to deconstruct these customs and start using an anti-racist vocabulary, said Darlete. Most of the expressions posit being black as something bad, reinforcing the idea that black people are below whites in the social pyramid. Such words are always linked to something negative, such as a coisa tá preta, meaning it's a black thing, or better yet, uh, that okay, I translated that wrong. This is saying a coisa tá preta, like that is basically saying that the situation looks bleak. It's a bad situation, basically. What I'm confusing is that there's another expression in Portuguese that says a coisa do negro, and that means it's a black thing, right? It's a thing of the blacks, right? It's often used pejoratively, like, again, in some ways, black Americans have taken that phrase, it's a black thing, and we've made it into something that's our own, because in Brazil it can have a negative connotation to it. You have fome negra, which means black hunger, and many other type phrases. In addition to these expressions, there are also stereotypes surrounding black people, such as the preta raivosa, meaning angry black woman. Now, where have we heard that term before? So, we know it in the American vocabulary, in the black, in the black community, but how many of us knew this exists in Brazil also? It's something that definitely want to go more into this in a future article, but I'm going to talk a little bit about this as this article goes on. And the negro desocupado, meaning idle black man. You could see like lazy black man because he's not doing anything, right? It's incredible how black people have the image of being lazy when whatever society you go to in the Americas, it was black people who built these society, built these nations from the ground up. Below, you will find words that need to be removed from your vocabulary, even as a form of respect, so that we can live in an egalitarian social fabric. Check the list of racist expressions that should be removed from your vocabulary. So let's go through some of these. Denigrir, meaning denigrate. The term refers to making something black, something bad, a lie, a rumor spread about someone, reinforcing the fallacy that being black is something bad. Replace them with difamar, meaning to defame, caluniar, meaning to slander, or injuriar, meaning revile. Domestica, which, you can see what this means. It means domestic, or it also can be translated as a maid. The word began to be used in the slave period to refer to enslaved women who worked in the casa grande, meaning the big house or the master's house. Today, many use the word to refer to cleaning ladies and day laborers. The term still refers to black women as animals, claiming that they are, quote unquote, domesticated. Ovelha negra, meaning black sheep. I think we all know what this term means. It's an expression used to characterize a person who is different from others, different from the herd, who goes outside the standard imposed by family and society, again, reinforcing the idea that being black is something abhorrent. Replace it with different from the majority. Then you have mentira branca, meaning white lie, or inveja branca, meaning white envy. These are terms used to refer to bad behavior like lying or feeling envious of someone, but when added to white, they become positive feelings that do no harm to anyone. So then you have this term, da cor do pecado, meaning the color of sin. The expression was used to refer to Black women, reinforcing the idea that because of their bodies, men are led to sin. Such an idea arose in the slavery period where the Black woman was seen as one sent by the devil as a temptation to the white man. Okay. So basically, she has the color, this brown or black skin is something that is so, a white man can't resist. And he's led into sin because of the nature of this Black woman, right? This phrase actually was the title of a popular novella, Brazilian soap opera from 2004. It starred arguably Brazil's top Black actress, Thais Araújo. In 2004, it was a global, I think it was a global television novella. And it involved, like I said, Thais Araújo was a girl named Preta. She played a girl named Preta. Preta actually means black. But another interesting thing is to look at what I'm saying about how they stamped the title of the novella, Da Cor do Pecado, on a Black woman's, upper body or her chest area. And it's very sexually suggestive. And that's what the term is actually saying of the color of sin is basically, as I just said, it's saying this color is attracting and it's going to bring you into sinning. The just the very nature of Black women is to entice the white man into doing something that he's not supposed to be doing. So that's kind of what else can be said about that? Is it's not kind of obvious? I mean, they didn't choose to use a white model and a white chest to show off the color of sin. Anyway, continuing on, the term mulata, uh, it's in the Spanish language, and obviously they use this term in Portuguese also, and then in English it becomes mulatto. But mulata being the feminine version of mulatto. In the Spanish language, it is the name given to the offspring between a horse and a donkey. The term began to be used to refer to Black women who were the fruit of rape during the colonial period. Now, one thing I wanted to speak on here is how the term mulata is used in Brazil versus how it comes out in the United States. Because the United States, when people hear the term mulata, they think of, this fair skinned woman who's on the cusp of looking white. She might be trying to pass for white. So, generally in the United States, the mulata, the mulatto woman, is someone who's considered to be like a quadroon or an octoroon, someone who can lie, maybe move to the other side of the country to hide her African origin and be able to pass as white. Whereas in Brazil, it's not necessarily a light skinned woman. It can be generally, when I see mulattas, the women that are dancing during Carnival, they generally have very brown skin. They can be brown and dark skinned women. To me, I interpret this as saying any attractive Black woman in Brazil can be considered a mulatta. She does not have to have light skin. So this article that I did way back in 2012 was just asking, is the Brazilian mulatta just simply a Black woman, or is she something entirely different? So just by analyzing some of the stuff that I came across online, he was a famous Brazilian painter who was famous for creating images of the mulatta. You notice that she has very brown skin in these paintings. Um, some people could consider Camila Pitanga an actress as a mulatta, even though a lot of people define her as a morena, and people question why she defines herself as Black because she is obviously fair skinned. Somebody like singer Paula Lima, this is Paula Lima to the right here. In some ways she could be considered a mulatta because, she's an attractive woman. She often wears very tight clothing, and she's a singer, So most people consider Paula Lima to be a negra, a Black woman, but a lot of people of this color, particularly if they're dancing Carnival, some have argued that the term mulatta is a title these days. It's not certainly, it doesn't have to be a racial terminology. It could be a woman who's dancing during Carnival. If she's Black, she can be defined as a mulatta. I made a point of saying the difference between what they call a mulatta and a preta, a mulatta and a negra, for example. Negra and preta both meaning Black. And I looked at, say, the 1970s situation comedy, Good Times, classic. Everybody remembers Good Times. Everybody's got a favorite episode, a favorite character. if you were to apply mulata and preta and negra to good times in the Brazilian ideal of what race and color means, then you could actually say that somebody like Esther Roll, because of her phenotype, darker skinned black woman with kinkier hair, would be considered the preta, whereas people like Thelma and Willona could be considered mulattas. Now, of course, we don't do that in the States. All of these women would be considered just black in the United States. But of course, it's funny because the way we define an attractive black woman, we don't necessarily move them out into another color category, but in some ways we do when you really think about it. Um, Another thing that I noticed in Brazil is that a lot of women that we would just naturally just call them just black women, American singers such as say Donna Summer and Diana Ross and numerous other black American women, when you see them in magazines or advertisements in Brazil, they might be defined as mulattas. So, what is a mulatta, right? Going on a little bit further, just how these terminologies play out in terms of how Brazilians see this. You take a woman like Chris Viana, she's an actress. Here she's labeled as the first black queen of Grande Rio. She was a, carnival dancer. But she's labeled as a negra here. But then at the side, she's labeled as a mulatta. Here, Thais Araújo interview. I can't really read what I got highlighted here. It say, "We mulattas, we need a makeup that works well with our faces." Basically, some people would say Thais Araújo is a mulatta. She defines herself as black. Juliana Alves, this is another popular actress. She says people tend to think that negras and mulattas are equal or they're the same, which is what my point is. And in general, is it saying, you don't necessarily have to be light skinned to be considered a mulatta? And what this article is arguing is just, this is just another term for black women in Brazil, a person of African descent. And generally, a mulatta is going to be somebody who is a visible African descent, brown skin, but very attractive. So let me get back to the article we were talking about because I just wanted to explain the difference between how mulatta plays out in the American context versus the Brazilian context. Another phrase, pé na senzala, meaning a foot in the slave quarter. Senzala in Brazil is what they call the quarters where the slaves slept during slavery. So senzala means the slave quarters. So a foot in the kitchen is what they're saying. It's often used as a justification for not being racist, such as I even have friends who are, say, black, for example. Senzala or slave quarters was the place where enslaved people were held captive. Both are racist and use the idea that white people can't be racist because they have some kind of relationship or kinship with black people. Now, that's a funny definition because that's not the way that I've understood the term pe no na senzala. Actually, the phrase that I'm more familiar with is pe na cozinha. Now, pe na cozinha, that means someone has a foot in the kitchen. And when somebody says someone has a pe na cozinha, it means that the kitchen is a place that's generally associated with black women or the black help, right? So as that's the place that Brazilian society reserves for black women, if someone is said to have a pé na cozinha, it is basically saying this person looks doesn't necessarily look black, but they have a foot in the kitchen, which means we can look at you and see that you have African ancestry, even though you look mostly white, even though you might be categorized or accepted as socially white. We still know that you have some African ancestry, no matter how, what distance, how far back it is. And this is why I say in some ways, Brazil does have its own like one drop type of rule. When you throw something in somebody's face, they say, we know you have a foot in the kitchen, thus saying, okay, we accept you as white, but we know you have some African ancestry. Some years ago, the former sociologist and former president of Brazil, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, he became the target of criticism by Brazil's Movimento Negro, the Black social movement, when he noted or he said that he had a foot in the kitchen. He says, basically he was defining that like, yeah, he's got African ancestry, right? You look at somebody like Fernando Henrique Cardoso and you can see Brazilians are not defined as Hispanic because they're not Spanish speaking, but I mean a certain look that people associate with Hispanics and Latinos. You can look at Fernando Henrique Cardozo and say this man is not white per se. He's got that type of mestizo look. So the term might be racist, but I understand how that could apply to somebody like Fernando Henrique. When you look at him even now, particularly when you look at the pictures of him when he was younger, this man he just turned 91 years old this year. He was the president between, I think, 94 and 2002, right before Lula da Silva became president. And you could, again, you see this look with a lot of quote unquote white Latinos, white Brazilians in general, specifically white Brazilians who you can look and be like, okay, I know you're classified as white. You see yourself as white, but I can see, and I wouldn't doubt you had some African ancestry, which is, so this phrase is pé na senzala, but the phrase that I'm familiar with is the pé na cozinha, the foot in the kitchen, whereas this one is foot in the slave quarters. Anyway, let me just finish that off. Fernando Henrique Cardozo said that he didn't actually say that, but according to Folha newspaper, which is the nation's top newspaper, it's kind of like the New York Times. Folha de São Paulo is the newspaper. They said in the to rebut what he said, like, no, we have you on we recorded that interview, so you did actually say that. You did actually say that. So it's just basically saying like we have you on audio where you did actually say that. So regardless of how he denied that he said that, apparently somebody's got him on audio where he did say that. What we see here is the expression that the candidate of the PSDB, a political party that Fernando Henrique Cardozo was a part of, says he denies saying it, but it was recorded. What else do we have here? It says the Black movement will formally protest against the declaration of Fernando Henrique as a mulatinho or having a foot in the kitchen because the terms are considered pejorative and prejudice, basically. So that's, like I said, this is another term that maybe people should stop using. I haven't heard it. I don't know, not living there anymore. I don't know how often people might say a phrase like this, but this is just another one of those terms, phrases that people consider to be racist. So anyway, moving on. Then you have a term like preta de alma branca, meaning a black with a white soul. It's used to refer to an educated and successful black person, emphasizing the idea that blacks are intellectually inferior to whites and only those with a white soul can succeed. In some ways, this term has some similarities to the term like Oreo cookie. We'll say about African Americans will label other African Americans who speak a certain way. They have certain mannerisms, they use certain terms, they speak a certain way, and it seems like they identify more with the white side of the country rather than the black side. They say, this whole thing of you act white, you talk white, or this type of thing. You're highly educated, so it's kind of a pejorative term, basically saying you're trying to be white. In Brazil, in some ways, it has that same meaning, but it says that a black with a white soul, preta G or negra G, alma branca, is saying, this guy, you know how when Obama was president, people would say, oh, he speaks so well. It's like you see a successful black person who doesn't fit the stereotype from the hood, and all of a sudden they become acceptable to the white population. So you say he's a black person with a white soul because he's not like those other typical Negroes, right? So this is in some ways, like I said, it's somewhat similar to calling a black person an Oreo cookie in some ways. Now, if you take a look at this picture, these are all white people made up in blackface. I don't remember what year I first became aware of this. Might have been 2012 or 13. But there is every year during Carnival in Brazil, it's Carnival all over the country, even though Rio is the most famous one. In a city across the bridge from Rio de Janeiro is a city called Niterói, both located in Rio de Janeiro state. And there's a bloco, a Carnival group, they call them blocos. And the white members of this bloco or black Carnival block, they parade around in blackface with very exaggerated red lipstick, making their lips look bigger, and the exaggerated afros. And either they'll paint their skin or they'll wear black clothing to represent black skin. And when I first discovered this, I'm like, how do they get away with this? And I just remember there was a prominent Afro-Brazilian lawyer. He says, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of like a joke. It's the only time of year that we just kind of let that, it's just, it's all in fun or whatever. It would be a few years later before a lot of Afro-Brazilian activists took to the internet, like, look, we don't like this. We're calling for an end to this character. Now, this character is known, and the blocker that I was just telling you about is known as the Nega Maluca, which means crazy black woman. It is also a dessert that looks like basically like a piece of chocolate cake. They call that a nega maluca. But when this topic became hot news and somewhere between 2014 and 2018, it just seems like Brazil had become the hot spot for people wearing blackface. It just seemed like every time you turned around, there was somebody dressing themselves up in blackface and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was offensive to anybody." It came to a head when there was a public debate at this I forget the name of the place. It was like a cultural center in Sao Paulo off of Avenida Paulista, and it was a full auditorium because there was this play they had got put on, a popular play. I forget the name of it. I have to look it up. There's actually an article on the blog about it, and the maids in the play were, I don't know if they were two white men or two white women, but they were painted in blackface. And so that's when it became a public discussion because, black activists says, okay, that's the last straw. We take offense to you dressing up in blackface. And then when they had this debate, the people on stage, the white people who were responsible for the play were just like, we didn't mean it as anything offensive. So it became a huge public debate. Some years after, blackface in the United States, it became a hot topic in Brazil because so many white Brazilians started putting on blackface. So anyway, nega maluca, whether in a costume or on a birthday cake, this term is used to reinforce the stereotype of the angry black woman, which corroborates the naturalization of silencing black women by keeping them in their place of belonging as servants. It also ridicules characteristics of the black woman, such as her hair and lips. And this is what you see here with the big afro wigs and the lipstick painted to make the lips look bigger and to stand out against the black paint. I don't know if any of you saw the Spike Lee film Bamboozled, how he went into the history of how they used to create blackface. To me, Bamboozled was one of Spike Lee's best movies. You have to check it out. Let's see. Hard hair, noodles, and pom pom. Well, this is how I translated it, but I think it was cabelo duro and pom pom. I'm going to have to look up what the Portuguese term was. I know this is cabelo duro and this is pom pom, but curly and kinky hair has received several racist and derogatory names, and this is also the dictatorship of aesthetics that encourages Black people to straighten their hair and avoid voluminous, full curls. There's always been a stigma against naturally kinky, curly Black hair. I mean, besides this phrase right here, it's also Black people's hair in Brazil being considered bombril. It's a scouring pad that you clean your dishes with. And this is what they compare black hair to. It's another piece that I did on that some years ago. Then you have the samba do crioulo doido, meaning the crazy N-words samba, the crazy ninjas samba. Originally, it was the name of a song, a satire of how samba schools were censored during the military dictatorship. Now, samba schools have a rich cultural history in Brazil, and you'll see them when you see those parades during Carnival in Rio, and you see these bright, glowing, colorful costumes. Those are the samba schools, and they compete in these Carnival competitions every year. So this is what it's saying. It was a satire of how samba schools were censored during the 21-year military dictatorship between 1964 and 1985. The term, however, ended up being popularized as a way to refer to something messy or something badly done. Now what's intriguing? How people would say in the United States, it's ninja rigged. Have you ever heard that phrase? So this is what it's saying here: samba do crioulo doido, which basically, like I said, crazy ninjas samba. The word posits Black people as violent, out of control, and inferior to whites. Ah, yes. Criolla was also the name given to refer to the children of enslaved people. It's funny about the term Criolla, which translates into Creole, because depending on where you are in the Americas, Creole takes on different meaning. Creole in Martinique referred to, say, the white residents in on the Caribbean island of Martinique. You go to New Orleans in the United States, Creole speaks on this light skinned mixed race group uh, in New Orleans who were known for being mixed race. A lot of people come out of that Creole uh, origin in New Orleans, but then you go down to Brazil and the term Criollo almost means, it's in some ways it's comparable to the N word. And a lot of people take insult with it. A lot of people believe, this is, with rising black politics, black racial politics, a lot of black Brazilians are saying, look, it's a term we use amongst ourselves, but we don't like when white people use the term. So it's not as necessarily it doesn't necessarily have the racist, violent history of the N word in the United States, but this is another term that a lot of Afro Brazilians are taking issue with when it comes from people outside of their community. Then you come to, okay, you can say it two ways: no so tuas pretas or no so suas negas. No so tuas negas, or no so suas negas. Both mean I am not your black. I'm not your black woman. Or better, maybe the term should, as it's another term that's associated with slavery, I think a word that we could use to kind of transliterate or translate negas in this sense would be negra. How, slave masters used to use the word negra or negra, back in the slavery era, taking the term out of the Spanish and the Portuguese. So what this is the phrase refers to the idea that black women have an owner, that is, they are someone's property. The expression also says that negas can be treated badly, humiliated, and violated. So anyway, this concludes this article where I was talking about 12 everyday phrases that people all over Brazil know these phrases, and perhaps people should stop using these terms because when you really look at their origins, they can be kind of offensive. So I thought this was an intriguing piece because we have a similar history in the United States, like things that we just say in normal conversation every day, not understanding what the origins of these terms and phrases and sayings are. So anyway, definitely let me know what you thought about this piece. Consider subscribing to the channel. Share this video if you liked it. Feel free to spark a conversation. Drop a comment, below. Let me know what you thought, what was intriguing to you. And, consider subscribing and just smash that notification button so that you can see my videos when they first come up. And so with that said, I'm going to end the video here and hope to see you guys in the next video I post.